Unearthed Tales of Destined Souls, Stories for Pondering Mortals, Volume 1. Written by Paulette Ivy Harris. Read by Paulette Ivy Harris. Published by Paulette Ivy Harris at Kindle Direct Publishing. Copyright 2019 by Paulette Ivy Harris. Audiobook production, copyright 2020 by Paulette Ivy Harris. Cover design by Paulette Ivy Harris. At the birth of every soul, a tale receives its beginning, and forever linked are their destinies. Paulette Ivy Harris. This short story, titled Unintentionally Found, is selected from the book Unearthed Tales of Destined Souls. I am proud to bring you my oral presentation of Unintentionally Found. I wrote it in 2016 to explore our country's oppressive history surrounding racism and injustice, which continues today. The Black Lives Matter movement and its push for systemic changes in American justice, policing, and society has made this story more relevant than ever. Paulette Ivy Harris. The following story and reading depicts situations of violence and contains offensive language befitting its Jim Crow era setting and is not suitable for persons under age 18. This story is a work of fiction. Historical events, names of locales and persons are either used fictitiously or changed. Other incidents, locales, names, and characters are a product of the author's imagination, and any resemblance to actual events or locales or persons, living or dead, is entirely coincidental. Unintentionally Found is a sequel to another despicable story in Unearthed Tales of Destined Souls, titled Dereliction of Justice, but this story is told through the eyes of the murder victim, Lincoln Mack. This unfortunate young soul describes his outrage and the horror of being lynched. His introspection during the brutal attack reveals intimate moments in his teenage life, his aspirations, and his last thoughts of the loved ones he leaves behind. The trip through this dark passage in America's racial history recounts oppressive social prejudices and biased political thinking that 21st century white nationalists want our nation to return. And now, Unintentionally Found begins. I was lucky to have dodged Doc Clemens's buckshots aimed at me earlier that humid summer afternoon before the night I was lynched. I sought to wrangle in my fright. Hours later, my guts still squirmed like a can of night crawlers. In my escape, I'd sprung my ankle and wanted to hide out until I'd worked out the pain. Since my mother was off work, studying to pass the poll test for that year's voter registration, and my father asleep before his night job, I didn't dare go home and have to tell them about the trouble I'd gotten myself in. So I hobbled to the makeshift clearing where colored baseball teams practiced or played pickup games. A doubleheader was underway. In my close community, most people knew me or my parents, and they'd seen me pitch in high school games. I sat in a sparse section of the bleachers and avoided as many conversations as I could. During the games, I sneaked to massage my ankle. I didn't want to have to lie to explain why I injured it. The second game ended before dusk. I was the last fan to leave the bleacher area. From that location, the Ku Klux Klan abducted me. Be forewarned, the words here make my dying appear scripted and tidy. It was not. I'm a soul whose young mortal life was slain, and though death brought me peace, my dying before it was hateful and violent. There'll be no resentment if my story remains unread, but if courage can be mustered despite the trepidation the words hateful and violent may conjure, my story will be a testimony to an ugly era in America for which today's white supremacists are nostalgic. Whether a child or an elder, famous or not, two things are gained when we pass from mortality: clarity and perspective, wisdom's combination. Let not my wise, acquiescent tone convey that while hooded men-beasts were annihilating my life, that I was mature beyond my years, or that I could fathom their license to kill me, or that I didn't vehemently oppose my murderers, nor that I've gained the sanctity to forgive them. My name is Lincoln Mack, named after the great emancipator Abraham Lincoln, our nation's 16th president. It turned out he and I had something else in common. We were assassinated to make a political and cultural statement about white supremacy. For President Lincoln, he didn't see his death coming. His dying began unexpectedly by a gunshot through the back of the head in 1865. Lincoln lingered in a coma for 9 hours, enveloped by the sorrow and love of his family and friends. And then he succumbed. The news splashed across national newspapers and sent the nation into mourning. It set in motion a Union cavalry manhunt, which ended in the infamous assassin's death. And of the 8 convicted co-conspirators, the government executed 4 by the noose, the others sentenced to imprisonment. "99 years later, in 1964, to the detriment of a poor 15-year-old colored boy in Mississippi, our nation's civil and social policies had upheld the centuries-old political and cultural acceptance of white supremacy. Because of our country's complicity in that racist ideology, the breadth of mourning for my assassination and its aftermath differed from President Lincoln's and from President Kennedy's assassination 7 months earlier in 1963. And not only because of their powerful positions. They were also men, rich, and white. Though my dying began unexpectedly at the hands of mean and sadistic white supremacists, as did Lincoln's and perhaps Kennedy's, a long drawn-out agony preceded my death, sanctioned by historical racial bigotry intended to perpetuate inferiority, intimidation, and fear in an entire race of people. Unlike the presidents, I succumbed to my death surrounded in a hail of contempt and physical torture. Upon the discovery of my body, there'd be no crime scene analysis, no manhunt to find my killers, and no nationwide news accounts of my murder. Only my parents and friends mourned my death. My country didn't. There'd be no prosecutions and no justice sought for my loved ones or for my community. On a steamy summer evening, my dying began. I first heard the engines of rum runners and pickup trucks, and then I saw them barrel across the ball field. Behind them, tires kicked up a haboob of exhaust and dust. Before I knew I was the game, two vehicles had screeched to a halt within a hair's breadth on each side of me. A deputy sheriff, dressed in street clothes. I knew him because the police are known to everyone in a small town like mine. Opened up the back car door of a black 55 Chevy and stepped out. "Hey, nigger boy, ain't you Lincoln Mack?" "Yes, sir," I stammered. A double-barrel shotgun pointed at me from the front seat of the car. Fright let loose inside me again. The deputy sheriff locked cuffs on me like he'd snagged a violent criminal. "Get in." He didn't wait for me to get in on my own. He knocked me in the head with his billy club. The pain buckled my knees. "Help! Somebody, help!" I'd hoped someone who attended the game might hear me scream. "Help me, somebody!" His club crashed against my skull again, and this time blood ran into my right eye as the deputy sheriff shoved me into the back seat beside another deputy. Slam! The door shut after us. The car accelerated and jolted my head backward, in perfect position for the other deputy inside to stuff a rag in my mouth. The rag was filthy, used to wipe oil off the car's dipstick. The smell and taste of motor oil repulsed me. The urge to hurl possessed me. "Stop the car! Quick, pull over!" the deputy on my right yelled at the driver. "He's gonna..." The car halted abruptly. The deputy swung open the car door, hopped out, pulled out the gag in time for me to lean over and throw up on his boots. "God damn it, you nigger abomination. I'm gonna whip you real good for this." Then he mopped his boots with the rag and stuffed the putrid thing back in my mouth. The deputies on each side no longer needed to hold my legs. The double barrel pointed at me a foot from my head kept me still, except the crawling inside my guts had intensified. "Go on, let's get on with this," the deputy shouted again. The driver revved the car's engine and sped onward. The other vehicles followed behind. The word abomination told me why they'd come for me and who'd sent them. Dr. Angus Clemens, a man I've known since I was 5. My mother, Annalisa Mack, worked as Doc's housekeeper and caregiver to his wife, Dora, during the last 3 years of her illness, and to his son, Noah. When I enrolled in grade school, my father, Jim Mack, drove me to Mother's job at the Clemens house every day after school. Then, after my high school baseball games, on his way to work at nights at the sawmill. Mother worked late twice a week because Doc had evening hours at his medical office in town. Why Doc allowed me there in the earlier days, I don't know, except maybe he saw I kept their son Noah distracted from his mother's illness. Noah and I, the same age, were fast playmates. I watched Noah miss his mother as she became fragile and more distant every day. He longed to be held by her, but she was either too weak, in too much pain, or tranquilized by medications, which kept her from behaving motherly. My mother kissed Noah's boo-boos, dried his tears, and praised his captures of insects, fish, and rabbits, same as she did for me. On late nights, she read us stories before bed, except I had to stay awake until she put me in my own bed after our bus trip home. I didn't mind Noah's relationship with my mother. He needed a mother, and I felt special because of his loyal friendship through the years. Our schools were segregated. On my mother's late days, we did our homework together. In high school, Noah's textbooks were newer, so my help with his assignments improved my studies and my grades. We loved high school sports. Noah was all about being on his football team, and I was all about my baseball team, though he could have come to my games to see me pitch. At his games, I wasn't welcomed. Our ordinary conversations were equal exchanges, but he also listened to my ideas. No other white person ever listened to me or cared about my dreams and aspirations, or what I thought, or understood why President Kennedy held promise for me and for colored people, or why his assassination affected my people so deeply. Noah did. His affinity toward me was spiritual, needy of the love he couldn't fully receive from his ill mother, and after she died, not at all from his father. At home, Doc was irritable and emotionally withdrawn. For 7 years after Noah's mother died, my mother continued her employment with Doc. A winter growth spurt added height and muscle to our former wiriness. Noah and I playfully compared our pubertal developments, also the black fuzz above our lips, and on other places. The contrast against his skin made his facial fuzz appear thicker. I was taller by 2 inches. Football drills made him stronger, but pitching kept me tied with him in arm wrestling. Gradually, Noah and I explored our attractions to each other and experimented sexually. The disastrous afternoon Doc came home early and caught us in bed together set the apocalyptic clan hunt for me into motion. I recognized the town postal clerk seated in the front on the passenger side when he looked back at the deputy sheriff on my left and tossed him a dusty burlap potato sack. "Here you go. Put this over the stinking nigger." The deputy put the sack over my head and near about strangled me when he pulled the drawstring tight around my throat. Music veiled the drone of the Chevy's V8 engine. The driver had the car radio tuned to a country music station. All 4 of my abductors broke out in belly laughs and taunts when the top country song that year began, Roger Miller's "Dang Me." Unlikely to be a victim, only a white man would sing a song suggesting he be hanged from the highest tree for his irresponsible behavior. To further intimidate me, my captors sang the chorus in unison, extra loud. They laughed. Beneath the potato sack, I cried. Though the filthy gag reduced my wails to mere moans, I cried about never seeing my parents again. They'd mourned 2 children, a daughter to whooping cough, the other daughter to scarlet fever, so they were protective of me. The pessimism of the Jim Crow reality in the South contrasted with the enormous optimism my parents held for my future. Being caught in this murderous snare would devastate their dreams. "How'd you pitch today, son?" Mom missed my baseball games because of work, but she always wanted to hear the most exciting parts, whether my team won or lost. In my place, Dad answered her through the back screen door. "We was 2 ahead. Lincoln came in to pitch the last out in the bottom of the sixth. You should have seen him, Emelisa. He struck out the batter and ruined their grand slam chance to take a 2-run lead. In the last 3 innings, he struck out 6, and the outfield took care of the rest. Look out, Bob Gibson. Dad saw my ability to be a great pitcher. Though he kept low-key about it, he hoped one day to see me play in the major leagues. Time for homework, son, Mom said. She'd remind me that there's a time for every purpose under heaven and never to shirk any of them. The ride to wherever they were taking me was hot, as the car had no air conditioner and I reeked. Soon, heat and boredom beleaguered my captors and stifled their taunts to silence and listening to the radio. My sack was foul, humid, and difficult to breathe under. I was grateful for the smidgen of sweet air my nostrils sucked through a hole in the fabric. As wind came in the open windows and buffeted the sack against my face. My nervous fingers tried to twist my ring around to keep my captors from noticing it. It was Grandpa Lenny's silver L signet ring that Mom gave me on my last birthday. This slight motion made the handcuffs dig into my wrists. Sweat and blood stung my eyes. I pictured the long barrels of the shotgun propped upwards against the shoulder of the postal clerk, his finger poised lightly on the trigger. Panic pushed my heart into my throat. It's logical how the fear of imminent death compels you to think of mundane occasions and the loved ones in your life. I worried about Noah, for I knew he was in big trouble too. We were 12 when I complained about digging for night crawlers before we fished. Noah, you all the time wanting to use them worms on your hook. That day, Mom let me bring Gramps' tackle box. I opened the top and showed Noah. Wow, they look like real flies in there. Yeah, and once you make some, you don't have to spend time digging for them worms. Teach me how. And I did, the way Gramps taught me. And soon, Noah had a tackle box full of his own little winged creatures. On another expedition, Noah taught me to make snares to catch rabbits. One day when setting snares, we wandered too far into the woods, and by accident we crept upon 2 white men and their moonshine still. You hear that? Asked one of the old guys tending a large tank. The other man filled a jug within yards of the tree we crouched behind. They heard us, Noah, I whispered. Who's there? The other man called out in our direction. We froze like rabbits. We gotta get away from here, I yelled. Now! We tore off running for dear life in the direction we came until we found ourselves back at the house. We never ventured that area again. It took till after 9 o'clock before the evening sky darkened to pitch. There was no moon. Several cars drove toward us in the opposite lane, and for a few seconds, their low beams lit my sack. Afterwards, the sack returned to darkness. I could do nothing to hail attention to myself. I hoped for a flat tire, an empty gas tank, or anything to stop that car from its arrival to wherever. Though we traveled about 30 minutes, it seemed like an hour. I stewed in my anger at these racist assholes who sought to destroy my right to live and pursue the destiny my dreams had shown me. In my dreams, I'd seen myself accomplish 2 things. a career like Bob Gibson's, the ace-colored pitcher for the St. Louis Cardinals, and a home for my folks in San Francisco that I'd purchased with the baseball salary I earned. I listened to the radio or watched on television almost every game Gibson pitched. I wished I could have watched him pitch Game 7 against the Yankees to clinch the win for the 1964 World Series for the Cardinals. I couldn't because the Klan murdered me in late June of that year, the year of Freedom Summer. For the prior 100 years, the Klan had lynched colored people at whim. And to discourage colored voter registrations, the Klan lynched more people to heighten fear in the colored districts. Negro communities in Mississippi and across the South united to demand the unfettered right to register to vote, so they organized the Freedom Summer Project before the 1964 presidential election. My mother volunteered to work for the project, but kept it secret from Doc Clemens. "Quit all the fucking moaning, you black son of a bitch," yelled the driver. "Shut the hell up." The end of the double barrel butted my left brow and cracked the orbit. I howled from the resultant pain, which bent me over my knees and made me woozy. These bigoted beasts detested me for my affections toward another boy, but thought murdering me fulfilled a righteous judgment in the eyes of God. There's no place in the Bible that says God sees one sin greater or lesser than another, except for the unredeemable one, disbelief in his Son, Jesus. In the South, the lives of colored people weren't valued the same as whites. Any cause to presume superiority over us, or seize control of us, or take our lives was long sanctioned by the Jim Crow justice system, and prosecutions of Ku Klux Klansmen were rare. Jesus must have felt as I did, denigrated and helpless, on the way to be flogged and crucified. God didn't spare Jesus' pain, and I wasn't spared either. I prayed, though, "Our Father, who art in heaven, forgive us our trespasses." And I asked God to forgive my stealing cookies from the cookie jar, and for my lying about spending my lunch money on comic books. And just in case, I included the social transgression that caused my present abduction. As we forgive those who trespass against us. Unlike Jesus, at present, I had no forgiveness for my butchers. Early on, my Sunday school taught that God made me in his image as I am. So I believed he made me to develop my talents, seek happiness, and pursue love accordingly. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. I hoped death would come fast. I sensed the forest when the car turned off the road. For several yards, I heard the underbrush crackle beneath the tires, and the soft, uneven ground challenged the car's suspension as it lumbered forward and came to a stop. The engine and the radio ceased. Thuds from slammed doors of multiple vehicles rebounded in my ears. "We got the pussy-ass nigger," the driver yelled out of the window. My abductors got out, dragged me from the back seat, and dropped me on my face. I heard the trunk door unlatch. "Time to get roped up, gentlemen. Hoods too. We're getting a visitor for this one," said the deputy with the billy club. I lay there still woozy with skull pain after the last bout with the shotgun barrel, when I felt a boot come down on my neck. At that moment, I longed for a superhero. The most recent Superman comic book I'd read came to mind. Superman had saved Lois Lane from an intergalactic bad guy, pummeled him and his minions, and sent them all on a one-way trip to the dark recesses of interstellar space. Superman's heroism had set the planet right again. I'd often wished the comic book writers would have created a Negro superhero, someone who saves colored folks from dire straits, a hero who fights for truth and justice for people who looked like me. Good job, boys. We got him from here. Gonna teach this buck a lesson he won't forget. Mr. Powell's voice, the manager at the hardware store, woke me from my reflection. Two men grabbed me by the straps of my overalls and dragged me deeper into the woods. They held me on my feet. Headlights shined on me and seeped through the weave of my sack. And then someone snatched it off. My left eye had swollen shut, but the vehicle's high beams seared through my right eye, and its pupil squeezed painfully small to protect it. A dozen robed and hooded figures, all in white, approached me like dark specters against the bright backdrop of headlights. They cursed me and insulted my parents and my race. A Klansman cut the straps on my overalls, and they fell around my ankles, caught by my shoes. The deputy removed my handcuffs, and I felt some relief. I seized the chance to save myself and yanked out the gag. Help! Help me! Please, somebody, help me! I shouted to the capacity of my lungs. Shut the fuck up, nigga. Ain't nobody around to hear you screaming. His rebuke disheartened me to sobs. Get ready to get your ass whooped good, nigga, said another. Relief from the cuffs was short. Powell and another man tied ropes around my wrists and tethered me facing the trunk of a large oak tree. The breadth of its trunk filled the span of my arms. The first lash was immediate. The bullwhip tore through my shirt and into my back. Its tip struck high and lacerated my right cheek. I screamed curses at them, but their insults got more belligerent and the lashes more voracious. This is for throwing up on my boots, you damn fucker. The deputy loosed several lashes that zigzagged into my skin. Winded, he handed off the whip to the next man. In turns, the Klansmen plied the whip over and over across my back and down my backside. The whipping ended, and they released me from the tree, and as if by instinct I fought for my life. I flailed my arms and legs and hoped to connect a punch with a jaw or two. Ropes, however, remained tied around my wrists. Powell and the other man held on to each end and kept my arms outstretched away from my body. Defeated, I fell to my knees and over backwards onto the cool, soft loam. My buckshots missed your nigger ass today, I heard Doc Clemens shout. But I got you now. I'll show you what happens to fucking nigger homos in this county. Doc gripped my privates like when a bull is about to be relieved of the reason for its disagreeable attitude. With one swipe of his blade, Doc severed my genitals. I heaved forth an abysmal wail straight from the depths of my gut. Here's where to stick this, shouted Doc. Then with my own genitals, he gagged me. This humiliation excoriated every fiber in me. Too hideous, even for the Klansmen to look at what they'd done to me, they covered my head with the bloody sack again. In a godless, ritual-like routine, they stomped and hollered at me the vilest medley of curses I'd ever heard at one time. The Klansmen encircled me and discussed what they'd do to me next. We found this switch hitter at the nigger baseball field. Ho ho, you like baseball, do ya? Let's say we play a inning. Yeah, man, plant 'em right here. Let's play ball. Each Klansman took a turn with baseball bats and used my head, my back, every part of my body, as if playing t-ball, until they tired and left me splayed on the ground. Blood oozed from everywhere. My eyes swelled shut, my skull, my nose and jaw, broken. Pain overwhelmed my brain. The assaults left no place on my body that wasn't contused or lacerated or knotted. My body struggled to breathe. If given the control, I would have stopped breathing long before that moment. I was too weak to initiate anything except a silent plea. God, end this torture. But by defiant determination, my heart continued to beat. Move back, Doc, if you don't want Noah to recognize you. I thought, Noah's here? The deputy's words sparked hope in me. He'll be here any minute. The hope that Noah had come with law enforcement authorities to stop what the Klan was doing to me quickly disintegrated into the stupor between my ears. My hope was solely a reflex of my natural, positive spirit. My predicament was hopeless. I was no longer whole in body or of faculties, and I begged, God, delay no longer. Deliver me into your merciful embrace. My thoughts drifted back to an afternoon earlier that spring at the end of my sophomore year. I stood at bat, and a straight pitch knocked me out. If I'd been focused on the pitcher, I would have seen the ball in time to duck. Instead, my thoughts had wandered to my first kiss by a girl that happened after school in the high school cafeteria earlier in the day. Hi, Lincoln. What you doing in here? Pearl, a student in the junior class, glided through the cafeteria door. Just helping out Mr. Johnson before the game is all. Stacking these here chairs, getting them out the way so he can mop and polish the floor tonight. That's mighty kind of you. And she sauntered close to me. She stroked my arm and said, Careful you don't strain that pitching arm of yours. It surprised me when it happened. Pearl planted a long, wet kiss on me. See you around, Lincoln. And like that, she left the way she came. Pearl was pretty, I guess. But as I thought how unmoved I was by her kiss, or any girl's kiss to happen again, the revelation came to me over home plate after the 2 balls, 1 strike count. The next pitch decked me. That afternoon, I stopped fooling myself. My feelings for Noah were beyond friendship. Sit the nigger up. Tonight we got a visitor at his first lynching, yelled the Klan's leader. Take the sack off. Not far away, I heard Noah's muffled cries as Klansmen forced him to watch. I sensed his horror and grief. He couldn't do anything to help me. Yet, I was grateful Noah was there. Someone who cared for me was with me, and as outraged by the Klan's brutality as I was. I hoped Noah would never forget the gruesome tragedy of my lynching. I also hoped he'd remember the goodness in our friendship and be comforted. Get the rope, directed the Klan leader. It's time we finished what we came here to do. Powell slipped the noose over my head. During my torture, I was the most distraught when I imagined my parents, especially my kind, sensitive mother, frightened after I wasn't home before sundown. They and our neighbors would wait for the safety of sunrise to begin a search for me. In prior searches for the missing, I was too young to participate, but I knew they'd search for me in the routine places: the fields, the rivers and swamps, the forest, and the Picayune Bridge. I dared to imagine the depth of my mother and father's despair when they look down on my lifeless body and see the mutilation done to their son by the hands of these evil mongrel souls. I then slid into an abyss of emotion and regret that I wouldn't live to help them accept all the kinds of love my innermost soul contained. The opposite end of the rope slung over the tree limb above me. It was tied to a revving pickup truck, which pulled it and levitated my body above the forest floor. The noose tightened and cut off my air. The dignity left in my being made me kick and writhe in one last protest. Then, my body quit enduring the brutality of dying. My spirit dislocated from my flesh into the peace of the afterlife. Like roadkill, the ungodly brutes left my corpse exposed in the woods. For all the ways the Klansmen defiled my body, they failed to strip away all of my humanity. I'm certain, however, that they'd lost theirs, if they ever possessed any. In Neshoba County, 3 voter registration workers for the 1964 Freedom Summer Project, Andrew Goodman and Michael Schwerner, both white, and James Chaney, colored, were abducted on June 21st, also by the Ku Klux Klan. Federal authorities, pressured by the families of the 2 white project workers and the media, launched a statewide search of Mississippi. In the 6 weeks it took investigators to find the bodies of the 3 project workers, found on August 4th, the remains of 8 colored males who'd gone missing that year and previous were unintentionally found. One of the found remains belonged to me. I'm hopeful there'll come a day when people in our country and everywhere abandon the selfish exploitation or rejection of others because of skin color, gender and identity preference, immigrant or economic status, or religion. some of the many features that make each person unique. I hope people will someday embrace the sacred credibility of each person's merit in the human race to which we all were born, and accept one another as equals, entitled to pursue freely the extent of their abilities to become what they aspire to be. Perfection isn't what God expects from people. Being accountable and contrite for our errant behavior, however, is how God separates the forgivable from the vile. For the forgiving and fair, God offers redeeming forgiveness and justice easily, like a cloud releases rain. But for terrestrial souls, forgiveness is a burden, and society doesn't guarantee justice. My parents and friend Noah were dealt the burdens of injustice and forgiveness. Before they can get justice and are able to heal and forgive, they must wait for society's imperfect rectification of my murder. But for how long? The end. This has been Unintentionally Found, written by Paulette Ivy Harris. Copyright 2019 by Paulette Ivy Harris. Read by Paulette Ivy Harris. Audiobook production. Copyright 2020 by Paulette Ivy Harris. Book cover design by Paulette Ivy Harris. Music credits. Permission by youtube.com/audiolibrary in the order of performance. Verve by Benjamin Martins. Spirit of Fire by Jesse Gallagher. Maestro to Lakelel by Jesse Gallagher. Catch Up by Dan Leibowitz. The Twister by Dan Leibowitz. Sally Gooden by Nate Keefe with the Bow Ties. Take Me Out to the Ball Game by Ease Jammy Jams. Hickory Hollow by Dan Leibowitz. The Anunnaki Return by Jesse Gallagher. The Sleeping Prophet by Jesse Gallagher. Butterflies in Love by Sir Cubworth. Orison by Dan Bowden. Calcutta Sunset by Ease Jammy Jams. Sound effects credits. All sound effect clips are used with permission from youtube.com/audiolibrary, except for the following clips used with permission from Free SFX. Cutting Knife. Human Scream. Human Choke. Human Grunt. Human Groan. Human Breath. Paulette Ivy Harris was born in suburban St. Louis, Missouri. She graduated from Loyola University in Chicago with a Bachelor of Science degree in psychology. She worked in the insurance industry for 12 years before her husband's retail management career began to frequently relocate her and their son to cities and towns within central Illinois and Indiana. With her husband away on business during the week, she delved into researching a longtime curiosity, her ancestral roots. Her 18-year hobby in the research of her family ancestry yielded her first nonfiction book, Always a Blessing in the End, published in 2005, and inspired her first novel, Beneath Every Troubling Stone, published in 2009 in ebook format, now in paperback. After more than 30 years of researching family roots, her love for history and storytelling shines through her 2019 book, Unearthed Tales of Destined Souls, Stories for Pondering Mortals, Volume 1, her first collection of short stories. For additional information about Ms. Harris and also her ebooks for children, please visit the author's official website, pauletteiveyharris.com.